Hey, everybody, welcome back to Devin, the OG original Grognard. It snowed in Seattle. Sorta, if you can call it snow. We don't get a lot of snow here in Seattle. I mean, honestly, we like get 1 or 2 days a year, usually in February for some odd reason. And where I'm at in the valley south of Seattle, we rarely get any snow at all. And usually when we do get it, it's gone the next day. This has actually stuck around for a couple days. Now, granted, we got great snow and skiing up in the mountains, but yeah, not down here by the ocean side. And it's supposed to snow again this weekend. So I like snow. Anyways, yes. What are we looking at? What are we back to? Avalanche Press. Second World War at Sea, the series. We're taking a look at one of the tactical systems. We are looking at, what are we looking at? Battle of Cape Esperance? Is that the one we're doing? I can't remember. Yes, Battle of Cape Esperance. Just make sure that is the one. Yes. Battle Scenario 5, 11 October 1942, also known as the Second Battle of Savo Island, which was the second major engagement of the U.S. versus Japanese fighting around Guadalcanal and the Solomon Islands. This one ended up being tactically, the U.S. kicked the Japanese in the teeth, but the Japanese task force that the cruisers and destroyers were assigned to were able to complete their mission. So it was also kind of a strategic victory for the Japanese. They were the transports that they were escorting managed to offload their infantry onto Guadalcanal. They didn't get their bombardment procedure done, but yeah, the Japanese, I think, lost one cruiser and a destroyer, and another cruiser was badly beat up, and the admiral of the fleet was severely wounded. Gato, he was severely wounded. U.S. lost like one destroyer, something silly like that. I know these seas, I know these oceans. I spent a whole lot of time floating around them when I was in the Navy. Hell, first ship I was on, I did 2 packs, 2 West packs, and then the second ship I was on, I was 4 deployed in Japan. I think that close to the 3 years I was in Japan, I think we spent maybe 8 months in port. Spent a lot of time in the waters of the Pacific. Spent a lot of time around Savo Island and Guadalcanal and Cape Esperance. So I know these waters. I've been over these waters. Been through them a lot of times. So, anyways. Yes, I know some of you don't like the pontificating. But anyways, bringing in troops from China, the Dutch, East Indies, and Philippines, the Japanese hope to launch a counteroffensive to derive the Americans from Guadalcanal, Tulagi, and San Cristobal. Additional air fleets flew in, and the Tokyo Express bombarded Henderson Field almost nightly. The Americans imported reinforcements. On this night, convoys brought the 164th Regiment of the Americal Division and elements of the Japanese 2nd Infantry Division. The escorting cruisers detected each other and clashed. Well, that's not really exactly true. They didn't really detect each other. The Japanese got jumped and were taken pretty much by surprise. So time frame, night. That's all right, cool. Line of sight, really, night rules. Line of sight's reduced to 3 hexes. Can't see beyond 3 hexes. Pretty easy. Starting weather condition 3, rain. Yeah, has no effect on ground naval combat. If I was using bombers or fighters or something like that, then yeah, all right. But yeah, rain has really no effect on naval combat. Axis forces: Furutaka, Kinugasa, Aobi, Hatsuki, and Fubuki. Good thing I spent that time in Japan and I almost know how to pronounce Japanese names. So yeah, 3 cruisers, 2 destroyers. Allied forces: the cruisers Salt Lake City and San Francisco, the light cruisers Boise and Helena, the destroyers Laffey, Buchanan, McCalla, Fahrenholt, and Duncan. Yeah, the Japanese are a little bit outgunned in this one. Special rules: Hex A1 is Savo Island. Hey, what do you know? Hex A1 right there. And we even got a little island counter. Isn't that so pretty? Can't move into it. I think most other rules, or most normally, if you move adjacent to an island, you have to roll for running aground. However, the waters around Savo Island were relatively deep, and no worries about grounding moving into the hexes around it. Oh yeah, here we go. Hex A1 is Savo Island. Ships may not enter A1, but the surrounding hexes do not cause checks for grounding. There we go. Starting play with Impulse 4. Basically, we take a look at our expanded turn track that I went to go to BGG to download. There are 22, 21, 22, roughly, yeah, 22. Well, technically 22 impulses, but A1A you don't do very often. So we start on Impulse 4. I got my little counter here, little ship counter marking what impulse I'm on, because, you know, I'm not a clever man and forget things like that. I need all the aids and assistance I can get sometimes. Stop doing that. There we go. The Allied player has initiative and has achieved a surprise sighting, which is really bad for the Japanese. All right, no ships may exit the map from hexes Z5 to Z9, right here, which is assumed to be Guadalcanal itself. And action ships may only exit from Z10 to Z21. Z10 to Z21, basically running back towards truck. Variant, for a more balanced scenario, players may eliminate the surprise sighting and or set up their fleets in accordance with Rule 6.3, yada, yada, yada. Axis forces enter from northwest, Allied forces may enter from east or northeast. Exceptions 6.3 do not include Savo Island. Now we're gonna keep with the historical victory condition. Allied player wins if he scores 30 victory points or more than the Axis player. It is a draw if the Allied player scores 20 to 29 victory points more than the Axis player. Any other result is an Axis victory. Pretty straightforward, simple, straight up to the point, and the Japanese are probably going to get their asses kicked. So we noticed that we had a special rule of surprise sighting. What does that mean? Basically, in the first round, I think surprise sighting always starts on Impulse 4, but basically the first gunfire and torpedo rounds, if you can kind of see that on the sheet there, gunfire and torpedoes are considered simultaneous, although the initiative player gets to declare his first. All gunfire is simultaneous, so the effects of it don't take place until the end of the turn. So if you're shooting at an enemy ship, knock out his primary, one or two of his primary turrets, he's still going to be able to shoot back at you with those primary turrets because combat is simultaneous. Surprise, and the same with torpedoes. Launch torpedoes simultaneously, damage is simultaneous, doesn't take place until the end of the turn, even though the initiative player chooses what order what he wants to shoot first, or fire torpedoes first. Surprise sighting, whoever's got the surprise sighting shoots first and the damage takes place. Then the non-initiative player gets to do his gunfire and torpedo. And then after that, in the next impulse 8 and 9, when gunfire and torpedo comes back around again, then gunfire and torpedo fire are simultaneous. But yeah, so for that surprise sighting, you got to kind of pay attention because damage is not simultaneous. Simultaneous. Yeah, I can speak. Anyways. So, again, as I kind of pointed out in the last video, these hexes are big, but they're not really that big. I mean, I'm packing, 5, 10 ships in it, and, they can kind of sit in there. You can sit a couple different stacks in there. And normally you can break the ships up by groups, or they're supposed to be in groups. I'm still debating with myself the group rule. Does it speed up gameplay? I don't know. Is it just best for me to keep it in my mind? Do I want to stack them all? So we're just going to assume. What are we going to assume for this? Yeah, that each hex has got 2 different groups in it: cruiser group, destroyer group for each stack. So the U.S. have got a cruiser group and a destroyer group. The Japanese have got a cruiser group and a destroyer group. Yeah, there you go. Whatever. All right, so It is nighttime, so range is only 3 hexes, so you can only shoot at what you can see. And so since nighttime, 1, 2, 3, we just bumped into each other, and historically the U.S. got the drop on the Japanese, which is why we got this surprise sighting rule that's in effect. If for some reason we're not within 3 hexes of each other, or a ship is not within 3 hexes of another ship, you can't see it. It's just out of line of, you can't see it in the dark. Yes, American ships had radar, but they were in the early days and they weren't really that good. It's like, yeah, all right, yeah, we think there's some ships over. We're getting kind of a return of some ships over there. I guess we could try to shoot it, but again, it's a simplistic system. They don't get into that. Maybe in the, I don't have any of the later, nothing I've got is past 1943. Maybe in the 44 or 45 game sets, there might be rules for U.S. and Japanese radar being able to fire at night. But for all intents and purposes in this one, no. I don't think there's any other line of sight. You can't obviously shoot. You can't shoot over ships. So say the Japanese were here. There was Japanese ships here and targets in D11. You can't shoot over your own ships. You can shoot over enemy ships. I think you can shoot over enemy ships, but you can't shoot over your own ships. Also, if you're in the same hex as an enemy and one of your friends shoots at you, there's the chance that they'll accidentally hit you instead of the enemy. Hex size, they say the hex size is variable, but I think 10,000 meters is kind of what the default hex size is. So, these are big hexes. It's a big territory. That's why you can get, 24 ships in one of these hexes. It's kind of big. And, if you want to take this, this really isn't at scale, but you take this itty bitty island and use that as the graphic of what Savo Island is, it kind of makes more sense to show, how big these hexes really are. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into this. So we do start off in Initiative 4, or Impulse 4. We start off with Gunfire. So the U.S. has got initiative, and so they need to decide what they're going to be shooting. So let's take a look at what we've got. We've got the 2 heavy cruisers, 2 cruisers, Salt Lake City and San Francisco. One's got secondary batteries of 6, the other one's got secondary batteries of 5, tertiaries of 2, AA we can completely ignore, and of course, most American cruisers don't have torpedoes at all, not even the light cruisers. Speed 3, that's you're going to be seeing that. The Japanese destroyers are speed 4. That's really the only thing that we have to worry about. 3+ for speed is only on the operational scale. It doesn't take place. It doesn't have any effect on the tactical scale. And so we've got hull and fuel we don't have to worry about. So let's go ahead and start off with the Salt Lake City and the San Francisco. What do we got as targets? We got 3 cruisers and just 2 destroyers. Well, let's have the cruisers blast away at the enemy cruisers. So I think what we're going to do is the Salt Lake City is, how do we want to break up? You break up your fire any way you want. So, within some reasons. When a ship fires, all of its guns have to fire at one target. Can't break up secondaries, tertiaries, or primaries amongst multiple targets. But you can have the ships fire at different targets or the same target. So let's take the Salt Lake City. She's got 6 guns. Let's take a look and see if we can find the Salt Lake City and go over the counter again real quick, just to remind everybody what we're looking at with the counters. So, Salt Lake City, that's the cruiser. And again, if you want to play with the silhouettes instead, you can play with the silhouettes instead. I just like the top-down view. That's just my preference, or whatever your preference is. CA-25, that is not the whole number. That's just the counter ID. It's the 25th cruiser of the set. Speed right there, primary, secondary, tertiary. So just like we saw on the sheet. No primaries, secondary, tertiary. And let's go on. It has aircraft and anti-aircraft of 1. Again, not that we have to worry about. So that's what the counter is. That's what we're looking at. So we've got 7 primary or 7 secondary and 1 tertiary. So, yes, I'm using different colored dice this time. I like mixing up the dice. You do kind of need buckets of dice, because, I mean, the battleships get really silly, stupid big. I think the Yamato's got like a primary of like 16. So you're throwing 16 dice there for its primary guns. Cruisers and destroyers, you're not throwing that many, but I mean, still, 7 dice is still a lot. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And since my dice cup is not big enough to support 7 dice without it getting stacked up all over the place, we're just going to be rolling dice normally. I should get a dice tower one of these days. I tried to make my own once out of wood. It didn't come out real well. I think I know what I did wrong. I just need to go back and try it again one of these days before my folks sell the house and my dad gets rid of all his carpentry tools and his bandsaws and all that other good stuff. All right, so the Salt Lake City, I think, really it doesn't matter what we fire at. The targets are the Furitaka, Kinugasa, and the Yoyobi are all basically sister ships. I mean, relatively speaking, they are all stat-wise identical. I think the Furitaka and the the Kinu were sister ships, and the Yoyobi was a slightly different class. But stat-wise, they're all identical. 4 secondaries, 2 tertiaries, 1 anti-aircraft, 3 long lances, 3+ speed, 5 hull, fuel, yeah, whatever. All right, so I think we're going to have the Salt Lake City fire at the Furitaka. All right, so what are we looking at? Where's my pencil at? There's my pencil. Well, are we within sight? 1, 2, 3. Yes, we're within 3 hexes we can see. Are we within range? Yes. Primary or secondary guns have a range of 3. And how can you tell this? Well, you can either dig through the rules or look at this handy-dandy chart. And it tells you, weapon, tertiary range 2, secondary range 3, but you can fire further range. But it's, let's see, where is it? When firing at dark gray, factors are halved. So if you've got 6 secondary and you're firing at 4 hexes, you'd only have 3. And primaries can reach out to 5 hexes, torpedoes can 2, long lances 2, but they can fire at 3, and then visibility again 3 or 6, 3 for night, 6 for daytime. All right, so that's the range. We know our primaries are in range. Our secondaries are not in range, or our secondaries are range, our tertiaries are not in range. I'll get that right eventually. I noticed I made that mistake a couple times in the last video. So she's got 7. So the Salt Lake City is 7 secondaries. She's going to be firing at the Furitaka. In line of sight, in range, we've got the 7 dice. So what do we need to hit? Well, again, we take a look at our handy dandy chart here. Zoom in a little bit. Well, again, real easy. 1 through 5 is a miss. 6 is a hit. And if you're hitting at Oilers or mine layers, you roll a d6 again. And if you roll a 6, the ship automatically explodes and sinks. It just goes boom. Whee! All right, so ship-to-ship combat dice rolls, not a lot of modifiers, less than 10. And remember, you have a maximum of +1 that you can get. It doesn't matter if 3 or 4 of these apply. You only get a maximum of +1 on the dice roll. So torpedo fire to target bow or stern arcs, target threading the torpedo. In other words, if you're firing straight at the bow of the ship or firing at the ship's ass with torpedoes, it's a -1, smaller target. They can avoid the torpedoes easier. Okay, so we don't have that. Target ship is in port, dead in the water, tow, or being towed. We don't have any of that. Target ship is BB, BC, CV, CVE, large transport, speed 2 or lower. Now, anything that's in the highlighted in yellow is actually an optional house rule, kind of the living rule that the community has come up with. So speed or lower, so we're not any of that. Hex is 0, or range is 0 or 1. Nope, we're at 3 hexes. Surprise side has surprise siding, bonus of first turn only. Okay, so we do have that. We are the U.S., or we are the firing side. We do have surprise siding, so it's a +1 to the dice roll. Firing Italian, MTB executing torpedo attack. Nope. Crossing the target's T, which is basically if you're firing into their front arc, but we're not. We're more cutting into the broadside. So it would have to be along the front arc coming in for crossing their T if you're firing the broadside. So we don't have that. Firing unit not attack this turn, set of 22 impulses. I mean, I understand why the community has made this, because it's really hard. So they kind of give you, all right, once a turn, or every 22 impulses, you get a little +1 bonus to it. There are some other rules, some optional rules, depending on your arc that you're firing. So let's go ahead and take a look. I mean, maybe we don't need to be that zoomed in. The 7 firepower assumes a full broadside. Now, the optional rules say, depending on what arc you're firing out of the ship will reduce the firepower. So if you're doing a broadside, which is coming right out of, well, obviously your broadside arc, you get your full firepower. If you're firing out of your bow arc, you get 75% of your firepower. And if you're firing out the stern, you get 50% of your firepower. Mainly, most of your guns are up front anyway, so broadsides, obviously, if you're broadsides to the ship, you'll get more firepower. Bow, usually 2 turrets up front, so yeah, all right, 75% of your firepower. And the stern usually had 1 or 2 turrets, depending on the ship class, so 50% if you're firing out the bow. I have not played the game enough to know if this is a good optional rule. I mean, you would think, with me being the naval guy I am, I think this time, but then I'm going to have to figure out what's 75% of 7. Of course, everything's rounded up. So 75% of 7 would be 4, well, 3 point something. No, 4 point something. 4 point something. See, this is why I haven't been doing it, because you have those odd numbers. Yeah, we'll go ahead and do it anyways. And I'll just spitball it. So since we are going to be firing out of our bow arc, which, you should be able, if you're a gamer, you should be able to. There are no diagrams in the book to describe what's bow, stern, broadside. I'm just using common sense here, boys and girls. So all this fire would be out of the bow. Now the Japanese, however, when they fire, they're going to be pulling broadside shots. So, but that's okay. So we're going to be firing out the bow. So it's 75, since we're firing out the bow, 75% of that, it'd be 4 point something rounded up to 5. So we're looking at 5 dice. So we got 5 dice. And again, we're out of range of the tertiary batteries. So we can't fire the tertiary batteries. We need a 6 to hit, but we also realize we have a +1 due to the surprise sighting. So we got 5s and 6s to hit. And there we go. Oh, wow, 4 hits. That's actually pretty damn good. So what I do, just to give myself a little reminder, I put a 6-sided dice next to the ship stack that I'm firing at. All right, so what does that mean? We got 4 hits. Well, now we need to roll 4 locations. Now, they do have the locations on here, but, it's not, and of course, it's on both sides of the tactical map, but I kind of got it covered up here. Yeah, whatever. That's okay. Not to worry. It's on my handy little chart here. So we got 4 hits that we got to figure out. So we go to gunnery damage table. So we roll 4 times, 2d6 for each one. So let's just roll them, and I'll jot the numbers down, and we'll take a look at them. So we've got a 10. We've got a 2. We've got a 9. And again, you play the game long enough, you're going to know what the hit tables are. I haven't played it enough yet to know what the hit tables are. So yeah, there we go. So it's a 6. All right. So we got the first hit. Let's zoom it in a little bit so everybody can see. 10 is a hull hit. All right. Plunging fire. If firing primary at 6 hexes or any aircraft, we're not primary firing, and we're not at 6 hexes or more away, so we don't have to worry about plunging fire, which would actually do an additional hit, unless the deck was armored. And you will find that with the bigger ships, sometimes the deck is armored. The Hood, for example, was not, which is why the Bismarck was able to put 14-inch shells, plunging fire through her deck into her magazine. Boom, ship sinks in less than 5 minutes. So, yes, that's my historical overview of the Hood and Bismarck fight. So, hull. Okay, well, what does that mean now? We take a look at our record sheet. Well, let's not turn over that way because we have the snow blind coming from that way. So, we're firing at the Furutaka. Hull, well, all damage is 1 point. Every dice you throw is 1 point of damage unless you roll critical. So, the 10 was a hull hit. Bam, right there, hull hit, damage. Hey, yay. And rinse, wash, repeat for the rest of them. So 2 is, oh, no damage. That actually sucks. So we hit, but we didn't do any damage. We have a 9, which is a primary, and they do have deck hits for aircraft carriers, but we're not firing aircraft carriers. We're firing. So we've got a primary, and we also rolled a 6, which is a tertiary. Okay, so we got a primary damage and a tertiary damage that we need to do on the Furutaka. The Furutaka does not have any primary guns. If it doesn't have anything of a certain weapon system, you go to the next one down. So he's got no primary, so he'll take a secondary damage instead. Now, it's a little bit different if he had primary guns and he lost them all. Those damage would then be converted into hull hits. So, quick basic thing about combat, if there was never a stat for it and you get a hit there, you go to the next one down. If it had no primaries and got a primary hit, it would go to secondaries. If it had no secondaries, it would go to tertiaries. No tertiaries, it would go to AA. And of course, if there's no AA, then it would just be a straight up hull hit. If he had primaries and he had lost all the primary boxes, didn't have any more primary boxes, then it just goes straight to hull hits. Though that's really combat and how it cascades down. But so we had one primary hit, no primary gun, so it becomes a secondary hit instead, and the last hit, tertiary, we'd be marking it off. Now, normally, like I said, under normal circumstances, combat is simultaneous. That damage wouldn't take place yet. But since the Americans got the drop, we got the surprise sighting rule, damage goes through normally. All right, so that was the Salt Lake City. Now we've got the San Francisco. And the San Francisco has got 6 guns out the front. 75% of that's going to be 4, not rounded up any. What she's going to do is she's going to fire at the Kinugasa. So she's got 4 dice to fire at the Kinugasa. And again, all the modifiers are going to remain the same. We got the only thing that's going to be affecting us is the surprise sighting. So we get 5s or 6s to hit. And that's a big bunch of goose egg. 4, 4, 2, 4, 4, 4, 2. Nothing. All right. Nothing bad. You don't run out of ammo if you miss. I know there are some other games that sometimes have that rule. It just, all right, fine, cool. It's a miss. Now we got the Boise and the Helena. And they've got 6 secondaries each, but they're going to be firing out the front, so 75% of that's going to be 4s. Now, what they're going to do is they're going to combine fire on the Aoba. So what happens now? Well, if more than one ship is firing at another enemy ship during the same impulse, the first ship that's firing at it gets full strength. Every other ship after that, their firepower is halved, or their dice total is halved. So let's just go with the Boise first. The Boise first, she's normally got 6, firing out the front, reduce 75%, makes it a 4. So the Boise will fire 4 dice at the Aoba, and again, we're looking at 5s or better to hit. Oh, okay, so there's one. There's one hit. Again, just to remind myself. And the 2d6 for the location is an 8. And an 8 on the chart, focus, is secondary. So we look at the Aoba. The Aoba, secondary, so she'll take 1 point of damage in the secondary. And that was the Boise. Now we have the Helena. She's got 6 dice, reduced by 75% from firing out of the front arc, which brings it down to 4 dice. But she's firing at a ship that's already been shot at this impulse. Her firepower is reduced in half, so she's only got 2 dice now that's going at the Aoba. So you kind of got to decide, all right, who wants to catch the primary fire at an enemy ship, because everybody else is going to be secondary fire and is going to have half damage, or not half damage, half dice. So let's roll to see if she hits 5 or 6. All right, she got a 6, so she hit the Aoba again. We still got the hit dice there. So let's go ahead and roll location. 10. We rolled 10 before. I don't remember what it is, though. What is 10? Let's look at the 10. 10 is a hull. Okay, so the Aoba will take a hull hit as well. Oops, where's the Aoba? Right down here. Okay, now if you notice, you've got kind of these hash marks in the hull. That means it's lightly armored. That means primary and secondary guns can hurt the hull. Tertiary guns cannot. So if I was firing tertiary guns, got a hull hit, couldn't penetrate, so it'd be no damage. There's a chance that a critical hit can do damage, but we didn't roll a critical hit. So you'll see the Japanese cruisers have got armored hulls, but they don't have armored turrets, compared to the American cruisers have got armored turrets and armored hulls, whereas the American light cruisers do not have armored turrets, but they do have armored hulls. Okay, so that's all the primary gunfire from the 3 cruisers. Now what have we got? 1, 2, 3, 5 destroyers. The Japanese have got 2 destroyers. Okay, well, we've only got tertiary guns. Tertiary guns have only got a range of 2 anyways. So 1, 2, we're out of range. Can't fire tertiary guns. So now that's basically it. That's all the gunfire. That's it for the impulse. The impulse is over. We now go to the torpedo phase. And again, the Americans, or actually no, I almost screwed that one up. That was all the American gunfire. Now the Japanese get to return their gunfire. Now, just for the sake of convenience, we don't have to worry about the destroyers. Destroyers have got secondary guns. They're not going to be able to fire they've got tertiary guns. They're out of range. Destroyers aren't going to be able to fire. So we've got the 3 Japanese cruisers. However, a couple of them have taken damage. So let's start off with the Kinugasa with their 4 dice, because that's how many secondaries they have. And since they are firing out of their broadside arc, they're going to get their full 4 dice. They're not firing out their bows. So they get their full 4 dice. Now, the other 2 cruisers have only got 3 dice each. Let's pull 3 dice out. So that's kind of what we're looking at right now. But I think what we're going to do is that the Japanese are going to focus their fire on the Salt Lake City. So we're going to lead off with the Kinugasa. And since multiple ships are firing at the same target in the same impulse, the rest of the fire from the other ships are going to be at half dice. Well, you round everything up. So half of 3 is 1.5, but you round up to 2, so you'll get 2 dice. So each one of them will get 2 dice in their fire phase. All right, so let's go ahead and roll some dice and see how our fire... Am I firing at again? Salt Lake City. Let's see how the fire goes. So let's take a look at our hit chart again. This is going to be real easy. So target fired at target's bow or stern. Nope. Target is in port, dead in water, being towed. Nope. Target is BB, BC, CV, CV. Nope. Range is 0-1. Nope. Surprise sighting. Nope. Italian firing MTB. Nope. Crossing the target's T. I would say yeah, because the fire is coming into their front. Let's take a look at what the rules say specifically for crossing the target's T. Let's see. Friendly fire, threatening the torpedo, crossing the T, right here. All ships add 1 to gunnery dice rolls if the line of fire passes through the bow or rear arc of the target ships. Ships firing on targets traced through their bow. Yeah, we already... Okay, so crossing. So, yeah, I mean... The fire is coming, being traced through the bow. So it's coming in through the bow. So that way I would call that crossing the T. So the Japanese are going to get a 4 No, a +1. So, and that's the only modifier they're going to get. Just like I said, only one of those modifiers. As long as you've got one, you don't need to keep checking for more of them because you're going to only get a +1. So yeah, they need 5s as well to hit, even though they don't have the surprise sighting. They are firing across the T, and so the Americans are going to have to maneuver so they don't keep getting shot at like that. All right, so okay, so we got 2 hits. So we got 2 hits. Let's go ahead and mark the 2 right there, and let's go ahead and roll the locations. We got a 5 and a 6. So let's take a look. What is a 5 and a 6? A 5 is secondary, and 6 is tertiary. So we go to Salt Lake City. So okay, so secondary. Now, he's got lightly armored gun turrets. However, this is a secondary gun, and secondary guns can pierce light armor. So, we got secondary damage right there. And tertiary, which knocks out all of the Salt Lake City's tertiary guns. Well, there you go. Not too tough there. Now, we've got the other 2 cruisers that are also firing on the Salt Lake City. And both of them are at 2 dice, so we need 5s and 6s. Nothing from the Furutaka and the Aoba. Okay, so the Aoba got 1 hit as well. Put that there. Let's roll the damage or the location. It is a 8, and an 8 is secondary. And it's lightly armored, but they are secondary guns, so they damage the Salt Lake City. So Salt Lake City was at 7. It's down to now to 5. Yeah, that's it. That's that's surface combat. It's not that tough. Not that many modifiers. Really easy to keep track of. So since that was gunfire, now since we are done with gunfire, since both sides got to do their fun gunfire, now we move on to torpedo. Okay, so since the Americans have initiative and they have surprise sighting, they will get to do their torpedo fire, resolve it before the Japanese get to do theirs. However, let's take a look at torpedoes. First of all, we already know that the cruisers and light cruisers don't have torpedoes. Americans didn't put a lot of torpedoes on their cruisers. In fact, they really didn't put a lot of torpedoes on most of their ships. All these destroyers, 1 torpedo. And that's it. That's it. You shoot, you're done with the torpedoes. You got no reloads. Japanese relied a little bit more on torpedoes. They had those wonderful long lances. That's what that LL, and they like to stack up lots of torpedoes on their destroyers. So, American destroyers had 1 torpedo value and no reloads, where some of the Japanese destroyers had 4 torpedo value with long lances, and long lances did come with a reload. It takes you a full turn to do it, so you got to kind of put a slash mark through it and then write what impulse that it happened. So, for example, this would be impulse 5. If we were to fire the torpedoes now, we'd write down 5. We'd make a slash through the torpedoes, write down 5. Then next turn, after impulse 5, we could fire the torpedoes. Or is it on the same impulse? I think that's the earliest you can fire it again is on the same impulse. Let's take a look real quick. Japanese long lance torpedo. Because what's one of my videos without checking the rules? We gotta check the rules all the time. Okay. Long lance torpedoes. Okay. Focus. Japanese ships with long lance torpedo factors of 2 or more may fire at a target's range of 3 or 4 when firing at target 3 hexes away, have the total number when firing at target 4 hexes away, quarter, yada, yada, yada. After obtaining a hit with a long lance at any range, add 2 to the torpedo's damage. So, yeah, they do a little bit more damage, yada, yada, yada. Torpedo reloads. Japanese ships with long lance torpedoes carried 1 set of reloads, and the crews could reload quickly. When such a ship fires its torpedoes, place a slash through the torpedo number, record the round and impulse in which the torpedoes were fired. The reload may then be fired at any time on or after the same impulse of the next round. There we go. So on or after the same impulse. Okay, so that figures that out. All right, so the problem is we're at 3 hexes. U.S. torpedoes are out of range. Any of the destroyers, they've only got a range of 2. Now, so that means there is no U.S. torpedo fire. Now, the Japanese, so it flips over the Japanese turn. Now, the Japanese, if they wanted to, could fire, but they'd be at range 3, so their firepower would be halved from 4 dice to 2 dice. Not really happy with having my torpedo fire at this stage of the game, so we're not going to fire. We're going to hold our torpedo fire. And hey, you know what? Bam! Impulse is done. So we just move on to the next impulse. Impulse 6, non-initiative player moves speed 4, 3, and 1 ships. Well, all right, who's the non-initiative player? Well, it's the Japanese. They move all their speed 4, 3, and 1. And as we can see, all the Japanese cruisers are 3, and their destroyers are 4. So all their 4, 3, and 1 speed ships, which we know is the entire Japanese fleet on the board, can move. You move 1 space. And I'm not even going to get into the rant that I did last turn on the poor rules writing on how movement operates. We're just going to go ahead and do it. It's, what is it? Turn and move or move and turn? Turn and move. I forgot it there for myself for a second. So we want to get the destroyers closer so they can launch off their torpedoes. Torpedoes los. How do we want to approach this? Since I did say we have 2 different groups of the destroyers and cruisers, you move groups simultaneously, or you move groups together, but the thing is you can form groups up at any time you want. So, you know, I don't know the purpose of why they have the group. I'm sure there are smarter people out there than I that can explain why the group rules are in effect. But we want the destroyers to close because they've got the long lances. So let's go ahead and just move them in a straight line there. That's the destroyers. Now what do we want to do with the cruisers? Do we want the cruisers to get closer or not? You know what? I don't think so. I think we want to keep the cruisers at range. So we're going to turn and move to D14. That'll at least keep the U.S. in their broadside and let me continue firing full firepower while they close the distance. All right, so that was movement. You don't have to move. If you don't want to move, you don't have to move. You just don't move the ships. So that's Impulse 6. Impulse 7, initiative player moves 4, 3, 1 ships. Well, just a quick look at the U.S. They're all speed 3s. The cruisers are speed 3s. The destroyers are 3 pluses. But again, the plus only has an effect when you're on the operational, the strategic map, not the tactical. So what do we want to do? Those destroyers, the U.S. destroyers need to knock out the Japanese destroyers. There's no doubt about that. That's because there is a lot of torpedoes there that we don't want to deal with. So let's move the U.S. destroyer group there. Now, problem with the U.S. cruisers, I mean, I want to go like this and move here. The problem is the turn after, or the impulse after that I can move, I'm not going to be able to move into that. I can't move into that island hex. So that either means turning this way and going to B5 or turning this way and going B3 away from the Japanese cruisers, which I'm not sure I want to do. So I can either turn this way and get some broadsides off on them, or continue moving forward and then next turn peeling off and going around the island. Questions, 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 decisions, decisions, decisions. I'd love to say I make calculated decisions and calculated risks on these in when I'm wargaming, but God, am I bad at math, so I don't know. Yeah, I think we're going to go ahead and move there. If the destroyers do fire, then it's going to be at a -1 because they're firing at my bow and is basically threading. So yeah, I think yeah. I think that's good. I think that's what we'll leave the ships at. All right. Impulse 8, Gunfire. Well, we're back to Gunfire. Yeah, and if you notice, there are several move, shoot, move, shoot, move, shoot impulses throughout the turn. And depending on what speed your ship is, if you're speed 4, you're obviously going to move faster. Speed 3, not so fast. Speed 2, about half as fast as speed 4. And speed 1, you're moving about 1/5 the speed of speed 4. So let's see, 1, 2, 3, there's 5 movement impulses. So 4s are going to be moving 5 times, 3s are going to be moving 4 times, 2s are going to be moving 3 times, and 1s are going to be moving twice. So that's kind of an idea to give you how many movement points or how many hexes you could be moving in the game. All right, so yeah, again, a little sidebar that I made. All right, so we're back to gunfire. All right, so we don't have the surprise sighting this time, so all gunfire is going to be simultaneous. So, but the U.S. does have initiative, so they're going to get to fire first. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to fire the destroyers first. We've got 5 destroyers, so we're going to fire 3 destroyers at the Hatsuki and 2 destroyers at the Fubuki. So we have 3 destroyers firing at the Hatsuki. First destroyer is going to get its 2 dice because it's got 2 tertiaries. But it is firing, okay, it's firing at its bow, which means it's reduced by 75%. 75% of 2 is 1.5, rounds up to 2 anyways. Okay, so we don't lose anything. So that'd be the Laffy. The Buchanan and the Makala are also going to fire their tertiaries at the Hatsuki. So they're firing out their fronts. It's reduced by 75, 1.5, round up to 2, yada, yada, yada. But since they are ships firing at the same target more than once in an impulse, their fire dice is reduced in half. So the Laffy is going to be able to fire twice, or it's going to have 2 dice. The Buchanan is going to have 1 dice, and the Call is going to have 1 dice. Do you have to roll them separately? I don't think so in this case, because these are all tertiary guns, and nothing is really going to interrupt it. So I'm just going to go ahead and roll all 4 dice at once. So let's take a quick look at the modifiers. I mean, I know what the modifier is going to be, but let's just go ahead and go through it and show it anyways. Torpedoes at target's bow, nope. Target ship dead in water, nope. BB, nope. Range is 0 or 1 hex, +1. All right, there you go. Doesn't matter what if there are any other modifiers that apply. You get the +1, bam, you're done. So we're looking at 5s and 6s for those 3 destroyers to hit the Hatsuki. The Hatsu. All right, so 2 hits. So let's just go ahead and put the 2 right there, and let's roll for locations. Remember, these are tertiary guns. So 3 and 8. Taking a look. 3 and 8. 3 is torpedo mount. That's a bad thing. And 8 is secondary. So, Furutaka loses his torpedo mounts. Oh, that's a cruiser. Sorry. The Hatsuki loses its torpedo mounts. Again, very bad for it to happen. And what was the other one? The other one was a 8, which is secondary. It has no secondary guns, so it slides down to tertiary. Now, since damage is now considered simultaneous, mark off half the box or a single slash mark through it just to indicate that it's during its fire phase, it's going to have its full firepower. All right, and so then we're going to take the Fahrenholt and the Duncan, and they're going to fire at the Fubuki. So the Fahrenholt gets 2 dice, yada, yada, yada. It's going to be 2 dice. And then the Duncan is going to add 1 dice in because it's firing at the same target. Or it's the target is a ship that's being fired at by other enemy ships this turn. So we get 3 dice. Modifiers are still going to be the same. Looking at 5 and 6s to hit. 1 hit. So we got 1 hit on the destroyer. I like doing that. I like putting a little dice next to the stack just to remind me in case I have to get up or something. So location is going to be a 6. Now again, we could be looking at the charts that are on the map, but I don't want to crank my neck, so that's why I'm looking at mine on my player aid. And 6 is tertiary. So the Fubuki is also going to take a tertiary hit, but again, since the Americans no longer have surprise, damage is simultaneous, so the Japanese will get to return their normal fire. All right, so that's the American destroyers. Now we got the American cruisers. I think, again, what we're going to do is we're just kind of a repeat of what we did last time. The Salt Lake City is going to fire at the Furutaka. The San Francisco is going to fire at the Kinagusawa. And the Boise and Helena are going to fire at the Aoba. All right, so we know the Salt Lake City took damage last time. They took 2 secondary hits, so they're at 7 down to a 5. So they get 5 dice. They're firing out of their bow, so their firepower is at 75%. 75% of 5 is 3 point something, rounds up to 4, so 4 dice. So, modifiers, it's going to be a straight up 6. There's nothing that is going to modify it any better than that. So it's just going to be a straight up 6. And, ooh, the Salt Lake City's been just tapping really good. So she's going to get 2 hits on the Furutaka. And let's see what the locations are. 6 and 7. 6 and 7 is going to be a tertiary and a primary. So let's take a look at the Furutaka. So it's a tertiary. It's going to just mark that as a half. And a primary, she's got no primaries, so it slides down to a secondary. So she took 2 turret hits. But since combat is simultaneous, we don't fill them completely in because she's still going to be able to get those gunshots off this turn. All right. So what's next? Next would be the San Francisco with 6 dice. Firing at the Kinagusawa. 75% is going to be 4 dice. Did we say 4 or 5? 6 is going to be 4. So 4 dice. No modifiers. We're looking at a 6 to hit. Okay, so we got 1 hit that time. Oops, 1, not a 2. Roll for location. 3. 3 is target torpedo mounts. Not good. Because really the biggest chances the Japanese have of hurting the U.S. are those long lance torpedoes, and we've already lost 2 of our mounts. All right, so there's that hit. And now the Boise and Helena are going to fire at the Aoba. Boise's going to fire first. She's going to have 6 dice, reduced to 4 for firing out the front. And then the Helena is also going to be firing. She's going to contribute 2 dice. So we got 6 dice at 6s to hit. And nothing! Big old goose eggs. All right, so that's the U.S. firepower, or U.S. gunfire. Now it switches over to the Japanese. Well, what did the Japanese want to do? I think the Japanese, these 2 destroyers, we know they're going to fire their torpedoes, but what do they want to shoot at? I think they're going to shoot at a destroyer because they've got tertiary guns, so the chance of them, well, they're not going to be able to knock out any secondaries. And the hulls are armored on the American cruisers. So the only thing that the Japanese cruiser or Japanese destroyers can do is either AA or tertiary gun mounts, which is pointless at this stage because we're not continuing to strategic and whatever. So yeah, they're going to fire a destroyer. I think the Hatsuki is going to fire at the Laffy, and the Fubuki is going to fire at the Buchanan. So they're okay. Their tertiaries each are 3. Now, granted, they've taken 1 hit, but since combat is simultaneous now at this point, they still get that 3rd dice because damage is simultaneous and takes place at the end of the turn, end of the impulse. So they get their 3 dice, and it's going to the hit number is going to be a 5 because really the only modifier is going to be ship range is 0 or 1 hex plus 1. So we're looking at 5s and 6s. Ooh! Good, 2 hits, nice. So we got 2 hits on the Laffy. We've got a 3, which is going to be a torpedo mount, and a 4, which is a hull hit. All right, that's actually pretty good. So the Laffy is going to lose its torpedo, and it's going to take a hull hit. Now, it's a tertiary against a non-armored, so the damage will go through. And I'm just going to go ahead and fill this in. Damage takes place at the end of the impulse, but the Americans aren't going to be able to respond, so I might as well go ahead and fill it in. And, you know, since we're already here, let's go ahead and fill in the mount hits on the Hatsuki and the Fubuki. Just because, I mean, the impulse is, for all intents and purposes, the impulse for them is now over. All right, so that's the destroyer fire. What are the cruisers going to do? I think the cruisers are, again, going to focus fire everything on the Salt Lake City. So what are we looking at? We're looking at the Furutaku took one hit on the secondary last turn, took one hit on the secondary this turn, but again, since combat is damages simultaneously at the end of the impulse, she's going to get 3 dice. Actually, I think we're going to lead off with the Kinagusawa. And there goes the dice, run free. So the Kinagusawa's got 4 dice. The 2 other Japanese cruisers are going to be at half firepower. Well, they're 3 dice. Half is 1.5, rounded up is 2. So each one of them are going to contribute 2 dice. They are firing broadsides. But they are crossing the T, so they will get a +1 to their dice roll. So 4, 5, 6, 7, yeah, 8 dice. We're looking at 5s and 6s on the Salt Lake City. Oh, that's a bunch of crap. 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 4, 4, 3. Again, and I kind of mentioned this in the last game that I was playing. What was the last game that I was? What did the last thing I have on the table? Oh, yeah, World of War. I wish we could stack dice. I mean, I need a 5. Well, there's a hit. There's a hit. You know, there's a hit. But you can't stack the dice. Actually, I don't think I would want to stack dice in this just because there is no saves. In World of War, it makes sense to stack the dice because then the defensive saving throws, you can stack those dice. In this one, the attack, not so much. All right, so the Japanese cruisers did a big bunch of nothing. So let's go ahead and mark off his secondary damage that he took this round. And his tertiary damage he took this round. So yeah, the Furutaka is kind of getting tore up. All right, torpedoes. Or actually, the next impulse, impulse 9, which is going to be torpedoes. All right, the U.S. Are the U.S. going to launch their torpedoes? Well, they can. They've either got the destroyers as a target or the cruisers. Since they have the initiative, they get to decide what they want to do first. Basically, it's 3, or actually no, 4. So it's going to be 4 die, 4 individual attacks. So yeah, let's just go ahead and launch. Now let's go ahead and launch 3 of them. The Buchanan, the McCullough, and the Fahrenholter are going to fire their torpedoes. They're going to fire their loads, 1 at each one of the Japanese cruisers. The Duncan is going to save his. So each one's going to get 1 shot on the enemy ships with their torpedoes. So this is torpedo fire. Let's take a little bit look at it. See if there's any differences. Torpedo fired at target's bow or stern arcs. Well, there's not threatening, so we don't have to worry about that. Not in port, not a BB, not at range of 0-1, no surprise sighting, no MTB, no crossing target's T. All right, so there's no modifiers for the torpedo. So, first dice. Bump the camera all over the place. Against the Furutaka, I need a 6. Nope. 1 dice against the Kinagusawa. Nope. 1 dice against the Aoba. Oh, the Aoba hit. Boom. Not a good day for the Aoba, it looks like. All right, so we hit the Aoba. Now we need to roll location, and we use a different chart this time. We've got 7. We use the torpedo chart. There's the torpedo chart. Right there. Torpedo damage, we rolled a 7. So that's going to be 3 hull and 1 secondary. So yeah, as you can see, torpedoes do a lot more damage. So the Aoba takes 3 hull hits. 1, 2, 3, and a secondary hit. And again, since, you know, for all intents and purposes, damage is simultaneous. It didn't hit the torpedo. We don't have to worry about rolling for it. We're just going ahead and fill them all in. Okay, so now here's the problem. The Aoba has fallen under 50% hull. When you fall under 50% hull, your speed is immediately reduced by 1. So his speed, where's his speed at? Where is his speed at? Right here. 3+ is now a 2+. So that's going to be important. We got to remember that for future impulses because his speed is now only a 2. Now, granted, he takes one more hit and, well, he's sunk. But that's the torpedo combat. Very, very, very hurtful, painful, owie, ooh. Now, the Japanese probably should have fired more. They probably should have unloaded the cruisers on to the destroyers. Because, yeah, they're going to get their long lances off. Each one of them is going to fire off. Let's see. Let's go 4 after the Salt Lake City and 4 after the San Francisco. Yeah, because that's... Or actually, no, we can't. Because actually one of the torpedo mounts has been destroyed. So only one of the Japanese torpedoes, the Fubuki, or one of the Japanese destroyers still has torpedoes. So let's go ahead and fire. We'll go ahead and cross it out, but we're going to mark what impulse it is. It's impulse 9. So they can reload if the fight even lasts that long, or if they live that long. On impulse 9 of next turn, they'll be able to fire their torpedoes again. The dice is 4, so they got 4 dice, and they're firing it at the... they're going to fire to the Salt Lake City. Now, if the Salt Lake City gets more torpedo fire this turn, it's not like Gunfire. The torpedo values are not halved. All torpedo values are still at the full strike cost, no matter how many torpedoes get fired at the same target, unlike Gunfire. So he's got 4 dice to hit. Modifiers, I know this off the top of my head because I'm getting good at it. And like I said, there's only 4 or 5 modifiers. I get a +1 for being at range 0 to 1, but it's a -1 because I'm firing at the bow. I'm trying to thread the needle. So we're looking at 6s to hit. So we need some 6s to hit. And we didn't get anything. Poopy. All right, so the Japanese destroyers, we've got 2 cruisers. We've got 2 cruisers that have got long lances left. I don't think they're going to fire them. Well, mainly because they're not going to hit. They're 2 hexes away, but they're going to be threading the needle on any ship they fire at. So that's going to be a +1. So they're going to need 7s to hit, and there is no rules in this game for 7s to hit. When I used to play, what was it? There was a naval rule system I used to play. Mongoose Publishing put it out. We would confirm the hits. If you needed a 7 to hit the target, if you rolled a 6, you roll it a dice again, 1, 2, or 3, it was a hit. If you needed an 8 to hit, if you rolled a 6, rolled the dice again, a 1 or 2 would confirm the hit. If you needed a 9 to hit, and yes, modifiers could get up to 9s plus in that game, and it was a 6-sided D6 based system. You roll a 6, confirm it by rolling another 6. So that was a house rule we did. That's not in this game. So I would need 6s to hit, but it's -1 for threading the needle, which means I need 7s. I can't even fire at them, so we're not even going to fire the long lances. So that's it. That's torpedo. Then goes on to the next impulse. And what we're going to do, since we've gone well over an hour now at this point, we're going to go ahead. And this isn't even, we're just barely through turn 1. Yeah, 22 impulses. But I hope it's giving people an idea that if you know what you're doing, you and your opponent know what you're doing, it's not going to take so long. It's taken me a long time because I'm describing everything. But gameplay at the tactical system for the Second World War at Sea is relatively quick. I'm just being long-winded about it. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms in the comment section. I'll see everybody next time. See ya!